Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first in our new series of Evolving HR webinars. So we had a nice little break over the summer, and we're coming back to you with, I think, a topic that everybody will find really interesting, just a very different... Oh, is everybody coming through as Kirsty? Oh, have I done that again, where I've sent everybody my link?
Hi, all the Kirsties.
Oh, I did this for the first one last year as well. Oh no, I thought I'd got the hang of it by now, but oh, that's brilliant. So I do have some other names. There is a Kirsty Baggs-Morgan in the list of people here, but everybody else seems to have their own name. So Joanne will just have to remember that when it says it's me, it's Joanne. So God, that's typical of me. So my panel today are the rather wonderful Kelly Swingler and Camilla Rogers. Hi. Would you like to introduce yourselves, ladies, and just say a bit about who you are and what you do? Camilla, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Hello, all the Kirsties. I'm Camilla. I run a business called 50/50. I'm a performance and wellbeing coach and someone who is passionate about burnout, and I've done all the amazing training that Kelly does as well. So we're pretty much aligned as far as I'm aware. Unless today shows otherwise. But the whole concept of building mental fitness to build that kind of mental flexibility, that kind of neuroplasticity that we need in order to show up and thrive as our best selves is a really big part of the team here at 50/50. We work with HR teams to provide coaching, therapy, training sessions, and I've created a Rewire program that's kind of the IP and framework we work through to help people elevate and show up as their best selves and perform at their highest without burning out. So hopefully that's a conversation.
Lovely. Kelly, does anyone not know who you are?
Don't say that. There may well be people here that have no idea who I am. So hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Swingler. I am the Burnoutologist and founder of the Burnout Academy. So yeah, I think in terms of today's topic, so my first burnout made me really seriously ill. Second nearly killed me. And over the last more than a decade now, kind of 11, 12 years, I have coached over 700 leaders through burnout. And in the Burnout Academy, I've trained over, I think we're at 134 coaches now over the last 12 months from 14 different countries in how to be burnout aware, right? How to spot it, how to see what's happening. So I think from a lived experience, from a training experience, and I suppose from a work life experience, right? This topic, anything to do with burnout, kind of mental fitness, all of that stuff is really what gets me out of bed in the morning. So yeah, lovely to be with you all.
Have you really had 134 people go through the academy already? That's incredible.
I have 14 countries as well, which that's I'm very proud of. Thanks.
Yeah, I was in the first cohort.
You were. Yeah.
And
Camilla's joined me twice. So Cam you did the 2-day, didn't you? And then the 5-day.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I love it.
So if anybody, as we go through this, if any of you have got any questions, please do pop them in the chat, and also let us know where it is that you're dialing in from. I'm just nosy. There's no real reason for that other than me being nosy. Someone said in the chat that Camilla's sound is dropping a little bit, so we'll see how we go with that. I mean, I could hear you, Camilla, but I don't know if that's a problem that everyone's having. But as long as you can be understood, that's the main thing. So. I want to start us off like there's the word that gets thrown around a lot when we're talking about, this kind of ability to withstand and handle life's ups and downs is resilience. And I have a love-hate relationship with it. I know Kelly has a hate-hate relationship with it. It's often seen there's this sort of tough image that goes along with resilience, and it's seen almost like a badge of honor in some workplaces. So when do you think being resilient, as it were, tips into something that could be a bit more harmful, like putting up with too much or ignoring signs of burnout? And I think I used it in one of the posts. I think about expressions like keep calm and carry on. It's like there's this sense that you have to just ignore it and pretend nothing's happening. There was a question in there somewhere around, at what point do you think it kind of tips into something that could be harmful? And Camilla, I'll ask you first on that one.
Yeah, I think too often resilience kind of gets twisted into endurance and how far we can go. It's about gritting our teeth, pushing harder, how much can we tolerate, how much more can we take on. And that badge of honour piece that we raise is really relevant. Lots of people see it as something like to be proud of. You know, look how much I can cope with and look what I'm able to do. There is an element that we need to, you know, be able to cope, but how far is the question? So for me, and the way that sort of we approach things at 50-50, real resilience would be recognising when something has gone that little bit too far, when it starts to deplete you. And if resilience ultimately ends up that you're going to ignore your own stress signals, then there's a problem. That's a massive red flag, and that's no longer a strength. So as Kelly will come on to, it is a fast track to burnout once you hit that stage. So often the most resilient people are the people, and not the people probably who can carry that burden and the weight of all the tasks, doing all the things for all the people, but it's the ones that know when to take that step back, when to pause, when to recharge, when to recover, and actually more importantly, when to ask for support. And so I think it's about the framing you have around the concept. And yes, there's a lot of negativity around it, but resilience is key for life, genuinely, for all of us. It's about when that line is sometimes crossed.
Kelly, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, I think like we've talked about before, and I think you came into the session for my burnout club, didn't you, actually, on resilience. I don't, per se, with resilience, I don't necessarily have an issue with, and I think as Cam said, right, we all need to be resilient. We need to be able to cope, we need to be able to bounce back, we need to be able to do all of that stuff. But the issue that I have with it, the big issue that I have with it, is that so many organisations, so many leaders, so many job descriptions will demand resilience, right? How many times have we written and have we seen job descriptions that say you need to be able to be resilient? How many times have we seen performance reviews that say you need to be able to be resilient? And actually, where it really kind of annoys and irritates me is I think too many leaders and too many workplaces use resilient when what they mean is you need to deal with whatever shit and crap we're going to throw at you, because we're not going to train you, we're not going to support you, we're not going to give you anything that you need. And if you then say that you can't cope, we're going to tell you it's because you weren't resilient enough, and we're going to put the problem on you. And when we start to see things like burnout increase, when we start to see things like stress increasing, when we start to see people not being able to cope in the workplace, we see an influx of resilience training, right? Everybody wants resilience training. We need to just train our people in resilience. And that doesn't solve the issue, because that doesn't stop what is fundamentally wrong within the workplace. So that's the issue that I have with it. I think too many leaders, HR professionals, managers, individuals, we see the word resilient. We then think, yes, I must be that in order to cope. We then blame ourselves if we don't think we're resilient enough because we weren't able to cope with everything. And employers and workplaces and leaders then blame us if we're not resilient enough. When it all hits the fan, just go, we need a little bit of resilience training. And really, for me, that's the issue that I have with it. Yes, we all need it, but I think we're almost using it as a kind of bat to hit people with and blaming people when they're not resilient enough. So that's my bugbear with the word.
And I managed to get 11 minutes into this without mentioning my book, but there is only 11 minutes.
Well done.
There is literally a piece that I wrote in my book around resilience where I always experienced it was in every job description of every job I ever applied for, must be resilient.
Yeah.
And so I remember writing this section. I thought I was really resilient because I got those jobs. And I very soon learned that what they meant by resilient was he's a difficult character. He's very demanding. He has high expectations of HR, blah, 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 blah. The reason I thought I was resilient was because I never quit any of those jobs. Was I a completely healthy, mentally healthy individual? No, I was broken and often in tears by the behavior of some of these individuals. But I thought that I was resilient purely because I never walked out of any of those jobs. And then at the point, I mean, you know this, at the point that I got let go from a job, I realized that I didn't have anything at all. And I literally fell apart, which is really interesting because I had always thought of myself as very resilient, but it absolutely wasn't what it did. I was my interpretation of it was exactly like you just said. And as you were saying that, I was like, oh my God, yeah, that was me.
Yeah. and like true resilience isn't that, right? True resilience isn't staying in toxic environments and just thinking, well, I'm amazing because I'm not quitting. Like that's not true resilience.
No.
And again,
that's
you
just
use
stubbornness.
what was that tool that you used? You used like I can't remember what it was called now, but you've actually got like a resilience tool, haven't you?
Yeah, the RQI, and it's great because it actually okay, they use the word resilience, but it absolutely isn't about toughness. It's about all of the different things that the different habits that we develop, and the people around us, the ways that we help keep ourselves on an even keel and better able to cope with ups and downs. So yeah, it really is quite different. So talk us through, Camilla, what you mean by mental flexibility and why you prefer that way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the concept of resilience being, a bit of a difficult pill to swallow. I mean, it's like a slap in the face to an NHS worker, isn't it? If you ask them to be more resilient, it really is kind of very much contextual, depending on where you're from. You're expected to have a certain view, and yet it's very subjective. Every person you'll speak to will have a very different understanding of what resilience means to them, what they want it to be, and actually how they show up and see themselves as resilient. And we see this all the time on our workshops. So mental flexibility is so when we first set up in 2020, it was the midst of COVID, but we were never a reaction to COVID. We were a reaction to my corporate career, and very much aligned to what you ladies have been discussing. Absolutely, that reality of just having to keep going, crack on, push on. And I was doing that through endometriosis diagnosis, adenomyosis diagnosis, doing it through a lot, navigating infertility, trying to return to work once I had a child, everything that comes with that journey. And when you step into a place of like forcing people to behave in a certain way, you just don't get the best out of them. So I took a bit of a pause in my own growth, if you want, to think as a coach, how can I bring out the best in people? And I moved a lot towards the mental fitness language. So for me, when I think about mental flexibility, I'm alluding more to that mental dexterity, that ability to be more flexible in nature. It captures the adaptability, our ability to pivot, change, embrace different situations. Like resilience is quite rigid. It feels quite structured to me. But to stand firm in where you're at and just this is the way it is never going to work. And we get curveballs thrown at us left, right, and centre. Health, personal lives, work. It will always happen. So the stuff we carry that creates our own inner context is very much about what we need in order to we have to be able to navigate and manage that, so we can then show up and deliver our best selves and our best work. And actually, I always use the analogy: you can't grow a mango tree in Iceland. And for that reason, that systemic piece, that broader context, is so intrinsic to how we can show up. And having sort of the reframe around mental flexibility versus resilience can kind of shift that perspective, especially in the moment when stuff gets really, really, really difficult. When we think about boundaries and workload and flexible priorities and where we need to focus our attention and energy, this is probably a more modern way of thinking about things, and a more crucially a little bit more relatable for most of us.
Kelly, what would you say that looks like in real time? So, in the middle of a stressful situation, how can somebody sort of reframe in that moment, or how can that mental flexibility come into play?
Yeah, I think again it's about having the tools, right? And I think as Cam said there, right, when we talk about mental fitness, which I know is a phrase that's coming much more into the forefront now anyway, but I think typically we don't do the same when we're talking about physical health, but actually a lot of the time when we talk about mental health, we automatically go to the darkest place, right? If we talk about mental health, we automatically assume that it's about all of the issues. And I think if we talk about mental flexibility and we talk about mental fitness, actually, I do think that frames it in a slightly different way. I think, again, what that looks like in a real life situation is as you hopefully would do from a physical perspective, right? Do I have the physical energy to be able to deal with this situation? What do I need? Do I need to take some rest? Do I need a drink? Do I need whatever? And I think really we need to be asking the same questions of ourselves from a mental capacity as well, right? Because again, I think the assumption is that we all just have this really full tank that we can just keep giving and giving and giving, right? We're being told, aren't we, right? We need to manage our emotions. We need to be able to stay calm, as you said at the beginning, right? Keep calm and carry on.
Do they just
And
mean
that's
hide
pretty much
them
what we've
when
been
they say
told.
that?
Say again?
Do they just mean hide your emotions when they say manage them?
Yeah, and I think it is right, because we're supposed to keep emotions in check, and we get told, apparently, emotions. If we're too emotional, right? How many times, Kirsty, we've had this conversation before, right? When we're told that we're too emotional, again, that kind of phrasing can be very gender specific. But actually, we need to, it literally is about that flex. Do I have the capacity to be able to deal with this situation right now? And again, from my perspective, that mental flexibility, actually, I do not have the mental headspace to be able to be dealing with this right now. I don't have the energy. I need to be able to, can you just give me 10 minutes? Can I sit and think about that for a moment before I give you a response? Can I take 10 minutes? Can I go for a walk? Can I go and grab myself a cup? Right? We don't have to keep reacting to stuff all of the time. And I think if we can do that check-in, do I have the mental capacity for this right now? No. Okay, so I need to step away for 10 minutes, or I need to come back to this tomorrow, or I need to do something else. And again, I think if we can start to talk much more about that, right, bring in some of this resilience, because it's not just about being able to keep on going. We need to be able to recognize, in workplaces, if we want people to be mentally, emotionally, physically, right, we want them to be happy, healthy, high performing, then we need to understand that each of us needs some flex in different different ways, different times. And it is exactly that. I don't have the mental capacity for this right now. I don't have the mental energy for this right now. Or actually, I've got all of the mental capacity that I need right now. Let's dig into this a little bit more. And I think we just need to start to be a bit more open when we talk about that stuff. And I think it does I do think it changes the narrative. We've had them, and we've got more coming over the next few months in terms of awareness days, right? When we start talking about stress awareness, we'll start to bring burnout into that conversation as well. We'll capture everything under the catch-all of mental health conversations again. And some people will roll their eyes, and some people, yeah, okay, fine, and we'll go down the negative route of it again. But I think if we can talk about mental fitness, I think if we can talk about this flex, we can start to have more positive conversations, right? And again, with the work that Cam's doing, we can start to deliver training in a slightly different way, get people to understand it in a slightly different way, and I think that's got to be better for everybody.
I totally agree.
I would add to that, Kelly, as well. So I think it's such an important point what you raise around being able to make that decision to respond rather than react. So I think people overlook that. Yeah, it's pretty simple when we say it here in this conversation. We make the assumption that everyone gets it, but the practicality of it and the reality of actually engaging that side doesn't happen. So the ability of having like this mental flexibility frame, thinking about your mind as this muscle that you get a choice to work with, you get a choice to build its strength, is that in that moment when you've got a packed calendar and you've got calls coming in, you've got requests like deadlines to meet, your stress will spike with the next thing that hits you. So mental flexibility in that moment is that split second where you can notice how you reframe that. How are you going to respond rather than react? I have to do this, I've got to take that on as well, or I get to decide how I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, that choice is absolutely so important. And again, so many workplaces are taking that away now, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, or whether we just assume that it's happening or not. And again, Kirsty, I know we're delivering this for evolving HR, right? In terms of hopefully we've got lots of HR professionals, maybe some kind of HR adjacent people that are kind of supporting as well. But again, I hear this so often with HR teams, HR individual, I can't do that. I don't get to choose. I don't get. And actually, some of that narrative, I can remember. Again, I've been kind of running my own business now for like 12 years, but I remember when lots of HR individuals were coming to speak to me, right? HRDs, can I do some coaching with you? And we'd start to talk about it, and they'd say to me, oh, I've got to self-fund it because the organisation will never support me, right? And I'd say, well, maybe just have a conversation with somebody internally. And it's, oh, no, they can't. Well, maybe, but why can't you have that conversation? So we'd maybe have a bit of a coaching conversation, right, about what that looks like. And actually, bar one person, out of all of those HR leaders that I've coached, not all of those 700 that I've coached have been HR leaders, but out of those, the assumption of, I cannot do it, nobody will support me, I can't do this, I don't have a choice, I can't get this. The assumption is very often wrong. Now, I'm not saying in every organisation. I've been in some of those toxic workplaces where I haven't had that level of support. But again, I do think sometimes we assume that we do not have a choice because we don't feel comfortable enough or confident enough to have some of those conversations. And actually, you know, to Cam's point there, if we do have a choice, we just need to be brave enough or courageous enough or honest enough to actually ask for what we need in that moment. And very often that doesn't happen. And actually HR is still the worst function in terms of, well, I don't have a choice, because some is, you know, seemingly you all need to be martyrs and you've got to be there 24/7, 365 days of the year, or else you're just a really awful person and you don't care about people. And that's just not true. Just not true.
Plus, most of it is us saying that, nobody else saying that. I mean, I have lost count of the number of times people are like, oh, I can't come now, someone's put something in my diary. It's like, well, you can say no.
You can say no, yeah.
Especially if you already had something in your diary, it's okay to say. Because the way I always say to it with people is, if you had a meeting with another manager and a manager puts something in that clashes, you wouldn't hesitate to say, oh, I can't do that time because I'm already seeing so and so. But when it's when you're doing something for yourself, like going to a webinar that you're interested in, and a manager puts something in, people won't go, oh, I can't because I've got something at that time. It's like, it's just as important. It's just as important.
And I think the stuff for you, right? You know, a lot of the stuff that I speak to HR about, right? Those meetings, that time that you would do for yourself, right? Be it coaching, webinars, personal development, lunch break, right? Being able to choose any of that stuff, treat it as though that were a meeting with the CEO, right? If that were the CEO demanding that you were in that meeting, that's how you need to be treating some of this time for you. And then to Cam's point there about, you know, about the mental flexibility and the choice, you can then choose, would I say no to the CEO? And we are allowed to do that as well if we already have stuff that's in our diaries.
Still human beings.
I know many of you don't. And again, I have been in that position. Sometimes I go, oh my God, I've got to drop everything because the CEO would speak to me. And actually, if I'd have said, can we do it an hour later? They're going, yeah, no problem. So, but you know, again, we do have choices. You have choices, whether you recognise it or not. And as Cam said, a lot of that feeds into that mental flexibility piece.
Camilla, what would you say in terms of like the what mental flexibility looks like in real time? What are some of the examples that you've seen of people actually doing that?
So I think we've kind of covered it really, like the way that people will take that moment to pause in the moment. So that is a really big clear indicator. Whether we've got limiting beliefs or whether we've got sort of other side issues, shall we say, with regards to toxicity in the workplace, which can be very much a driver of our behaviour. Ultimately, if we're feeling mentally flexible, we've probably got a growth mindset. We're probably quite happily open to, and we're curious to finding out alternative ways to problem solve and to overcome roadblocks. We're collaborative rather than distancing when it comes to working out how to move forward within the workplace. We're likely to want to learn from others better than us. And if we get something that's super scary come our way and we're landed with a massive project, rather than be all sort of rigid and cry about it, we're probably going to think, right, how am I going to go and learn from someone that's already done this within this workplace already? You know, so it's a mindset shift. It's one of I can and I'm curious versus I can't and I won't. And there's a play into, there's a lot of danger. So like, I know we'll come on to like traps where you can kind of like almost like overplay strengths in some instances, but you have got the consciousness and the capacity to just slow down a little bit, slow it down to be more mindful and make things that are better for you. And you can then bring your best self forward. Because this is what's always got to come back to. Is how can I bring my best self forward? Because we're constantly like firing on all cylinders, trying to be all to everyone.
Yeah.
You're going to be like a diluted version of you, and nobody wants, you know, a weak Ribena version of you, do they? They want strong, powerful, tasty versions of us, you know. So that's where we have to think about it.
Let me pick up on something there before we come into the kind of traps and that kind of thing. How can this kind of roll out on a team level as well as just individuals, and so that teams like HR teams can embed that mental flexibility into the way they work? So with things like conflict situations or decision making, what would your advice be for that?
I think I always talk about curiosity. For me, it's like the number one, almost like the springboard on which you can launch from. So like if you've got a team who build their mental flexibility, they are likely to be very curious. You know, rather than doubling down and saying, you know, this is awful, I hate this, or getting into an argumentative situation, it's like asking that question, that classic coaching question is like, what else could you do here? And it's being mindful that collectively as a group, we've all got our own subjective opinions, we're all coming in. There's no one right or one wrong, but we need to kind of work together. And that, when you've got people that are really kind of open to that and curious, that can be a really good start point, and that can demonstrate the value of mental flexibility.
Kelly, would you add anything to that from a team perspective?
I think I'm just going to say, like, I think it filters through, right? It is, as we talk about a lot from an HR perspective, right? It's leading by example. I think Cam's I think Cam's absolutely spot on in terms of that curiosity, and actually that's what we want more of. That stops a lot of defensiveness, but I think it also encourages us to not like look at the way in which we're all working as a team. So actually, how can we have conversations? How can we build one another? We stop a lot of that defensive stuff. We stop a lot of the silo working. We stop a lot of that protectiveness. But again, if we can start to role model that from an HR perspective, that then filters out more widely across the rest of the organisation as well, right? Because we do it, we live it, we breathe it. So actually the managers that we're supporting, the people that we're supporting, the leaders that we're supporting, then see it. So we're actually starting to like see it in action again. You know, you've both done the Burnout Academy with me, right? I talk a lot about the ripples, and actually the ripples of everything that we do start to happen when we live it and breathe it and we see it. And so I just think, you know, to be mindful of that as well. Again, I think what we are seeing, and we've been seeing this massively, right, since 2019. But again, from an HR perspective, from an HR team perspective, loads of you, right, as individuals and teams have been running on empty. And that is bleeding out into the organisations that you're supporting, right? It's bleeding out into the ways that you are not able to have conversations with people. You're not able to support managers more effectively. You're not able to support leaders more effectively. And I think sometimes we need to bring that in a little bit. So if we can understand what's going on for us as HR individuals, and then look at what's going on for us as an HR team, that will start to filter across organisations, and ultimately it's going to lead again, right, to happy, healthier and more high performing workplaces, because we will be happier and healthier humans, like doing the job. That's ultimately, for me, you know, kind of where we want to get to.
I'd love to. Sorry, I was just going to say, for those of you listening in, what are your thoughts on this, and how comfortable would you feel taking a different approach like that in your role? Do you feel like you can get curious? Do you feel like you can ask those sorts of questions and, you know, take a step back and respond rather than react? I would just be really interested to know
and
how
if
easy
not, can you share
find
why
that.
not? And maybe
Yes.
let's kind of help you with a bit of that.
Exactly
with that as well.
that.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that would hold you back from doing that, I think, if it's not something you feel comfortable with? So yeah, please share in the chat, and we'll have a chat about some of those. Sorry, Camilla, you were going to say something while they're doing that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the link to values and identity as well, which is such an important part of the journey of it. So we want teams to be consistently like cohesive under pressure. We want that kind of consistency and approach. And psychological safety, if you want to use that terminology, you know, ultimately we want to be able to show up and be our true self, our best self, and feel safe to challenge, to share, to overcome, to adapt, to do things differently. And we think about flexibility generally, it isn't individual, is it? Especially in the workplace, it's not looking at individuals, although so flexible, and it's the cohesive environment, it's the team collective. It's about how they are to overcome the objectives, the challenges, and whatever's going to come their way, the challenges of the journey of doing the work. So when we start to rewire all of this stuff, and we start to think about the curious piece, the kind of response overreacting, the kind of identity, the value, the kind of the link that we have as leaders, as individuals and teams, that's when you can start to shift, and that's when the performance elevates. And actually, I think performance is all about the technical skills, or actually from a sales perspective, for example, one area that I'm really big in is like supporting sales leaders to really thrive in their jobs. And there's a big link to burnout. There's a big link to kind of high stress and overwhelm. But ultimately, it's not their ability to close a deal. It's more their ability to be able to understand where they're at mentally, where they're able to sort of sit in this space about, respond to pressure, and then will kind of follow. That's almost like
yeah.
And what you said there about the kind of sense of self, that identity piece, right? So again, you've both done the training with me, but they're like my burnout equation, right? Is that toxicity minus our sense of self equals burnout. And a lot of the time in toxic environments, right, if we don't have that psychological safety, if we're not able to have that curiosity, if we're not able to have those conversations, if we can't be mentally flexible, if we can't say no to a meeting, all of those things, what happens in those toxic environments, and I talk about my kind of example of this, right, is being the square peg in the round hole. But actually what happens when you're the square peg in the round hole is in these toxic environments, and this can be toxic workplaces, toxic relationships, friendships, toxic thoughts, right? It could be toxic thoughts, patterns, behaviors, all of that stuff. But ultimately what happens in those toxic situations is we start to lose our corners, right? We become this kind of misshapen round peg in a round hole, and we start to lose a lot of that sense of self. So when we lose our sense of self, actually what happens to our mental resilience, our mental fitness, is that starts to erode at the same time as well. We start to mask more, and then inadvertently what we do is we start to become part of the toxicity that's in that toxic environment, because we're then masking, we're then thinking that we've got to think differently, feel differently, talk differently. All of that sort of stuff then feeds in. So yeah, psychological safety, being able to bring our best self. We've got to know what, like, in order to bring my best self, I need to know what my best self is, right? I need to know who my best self is in order for me to bring that to the party anyway. And if it is still square peg round hole, and I'm trying to squeeze into kind of misshapen round peg, I can't bring my best self. I can't be my best self, because I've lost almost, right? What will have happened is I will have lost the best part of myself in order to kind of bring that to the forefront as well. And so, of course, yeah, toxic, culture, communication, relationships, all of that plays a part.
Somebody's sent me a private message because they don't want their name shared, which is absolutely fine. But the comment that they've sent me is, I recently suffered a period of burnout, and when I finally plucked up the courage to communicate this to my manager, I was told it was my own doing because I needed to manage my time better. But I was given a specific impossible workload, and I was unable to say no because when I tried, I was told tough. And it makes you mad, doesn't it?
This shit makes me really mad. I've actually, just before I came on here, I was recording a video about some of this stuff, and like genuinely, I'm so sorry that that's what you were told, and to the point that I just made, right? That is the toxicity. That is the toxicity that causes us to lose our sense of self, and we shouldn't have that. Now, not to excuse any of that, but I do think a lot of what is happening in organisations at the moment, and it has been growing massively since 2020. Because every single organisation, right, has just been going from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. What I've been saying for years, we need everybody to take a collective breath, right? We need a collective breath and a collective pause. So many leaders, so many individuals are running on empty, and therefore they don't have the capacity. So if Kirsty's my manager, and Kirsty's got no capacity, Kirsty can't function because Kirsty's already herself running on empty. If I go to Kirsty and then say, Kirsty, I'm really struggling at the minute, right? I think I'm at burnout. If Kirsty's already, again, kind of glass full, stress bucket full, can't operate, she's already in her fight, flight, freeze response in her brain. If I then go to her and say, Kirsty, I'm really struggling, Kirsty's response is, Kirsty needs to keep herself safe. Kirsty cannot then take on my issues as well, and so therefore Kirsty's response is likely to be, tough shit, Kelly, you should have been looking after yourself a little bit more, should have been managing your workload, we're all feeling a bit the same, just get on with it. That is not, whilst sadly, and it genuinely breaks my heart, and I'm so sorry that happened to you, whilst that is becoming more of the norm, it's not normal. And in those sorts of environments, for me, I think, there is a question: do you want to stay? Do you need to stay? Can you afford to not stay? I know job market's not brilliant at the moment, but like, is that an organisation that you would want to stay in? I think ultimately, and maybe that's an organisation that needs Cam in to go and do some training and get everybody there, because if that's how managers are responding, that's what I mean, that's what filters and trickles out across the organisation. That's where the toxicity comes from.
That's horrible.
Just please take care of you. Please take care of you.
Yeah. It's very difficult process to when going to work and then it becomes like microscopic time where you can actually process it alone, understand, let alone do. And to make any decision, you've got to kind of go from your heart. But what you've got to, what you've got to listen to from Kelly's perspective is that she's coached so many people in this space that there are ways through it. There are ways beyond it. And the question is, sometimes it takes a while for us as individuals, I've been there too, to kind of come to our own awareness around, am I willing to take this step? And is this worth my help? Is this worth, everything's an opportunity cost. I'm an economics graduate, I've back to it, everything's a trade-off. And we have to put in our logical head, which is easy to do when you're stressed, because it's, but it's not easy to do when you're stressed, because it's like very, very difficult to be rational, as we know, but it's something that almost creates the opportunity to do. It's almost like, right, I'm going to take some night off, not having any distractions, and I'm going to sit down with a piece of paper and I'm going to write how I'm feeling, what I want to do next, and with one step at a time.
Yeah.
It's I remember being told once, if you can't cope with it, we'll find someone who can, which was nice.
Good luck with that then, knobheads, right?
Well, that's what you want to say, absolutely. So I did a little poll then while we were talking around whether people feel they can say no to things they've been asked to do at work, and but I did yes, no, sometimes, and the biggest was sometimes by some margin. It was about 60%, but then yes and no were, I think it was 20-20-60. So, which is interesting. I've just done another one now, another little poll saying, do you feel like you can be yourself at work? So let's see what we get for that one. And I never, ever could. I don't know about you guys. I never, ever could. Not fully. There was always an awful lot of myself that I felt I was hiding. So losing that sense of self was really, really big.
And I think for the three of us, right? I mean, we've all kind of, and when I say the three of us, sorry, Cam, not to exclude you from this one, but I think, from you, me and Michelle, Kirsty, like we have shown, right, like this was corporate Kirsty, this was corporate Michelle, and this was corporate Kelly. We are unrecognisable in terms of what we do, right, in terms of everything, right, like even our face shape looks totally different. Like there is not one part of any of those pictures where we look anything like our true selves, right? Because it was corporate masking. This is what I need to do, and it wasn't just I'm putting on a corporate suit, right? You can literally see that all three of us have had the life sucked out of us. In terms of like how we present, like that's kind of what it looks like, right? One of my sons had I Am Legend on last night, right? That's what it was like. We were like the people that are all trying to go after Will Smith, right? Literally having the life sucked out of us so we could then go suck the life out of everybody else. That's what we looked like.
Those photos are really bad. They really are. It's quite shocking.
From the flip side of showing up authentically at work, it's what led me to set up 50/50. So I'd got to a point where I'd masked through careers around pain. So I didn't feel like I wasn't really being myself. I was really fortunate in my career that I actually had spaces where I could really thrive in a period of time that I felt like I was beginning to go down the zone where I feel like you both and Michelle as well really hung out for a long time. I kind of was able to cut short quite quickly. But what I started to do was to really sort of open, and this might give some inspiration to other people on the call who might be in the same situation. Because when people started asking me how I was doing, I stopped saying I'm fine. And I actually started to be truthful. And there was this one moment where I was offered, returning from mat leave, I'd gone through hell and everything. I'd been that girl trying to ring the EAP on mat leave, driving my partner's car to get a small amount of private time whilst my baby was asleep. And it was all kind of crashing down around me, only to get a crap EAP service. That's one of the missions behind 50/50 is like, I'm not having this. So I was in that space where life wasn't right and everything was coming together. And actually to sit there and say, oh, yeah, I'm a new mum, I'm going to go and have a donut in room 101 because you guys have all invited me along. It felt really disingenuous. And I just said, you know, like, no, I'm not doing that well. And I am struggling right now. And I've come back to the situation. I've got a new team. I've got a gen up on the financial markets. We've been out for 12 months. I've been baby sensory, singing, you know, Wheels in the Bus, not looking at the latest markets, you know, on FTSE. And I said, I've got a lot to catch up on, and it's overwhelming. I'm also moving out, setting up a new home, buying a new car, and doing an unpack, repack sort of situation all at the same day. So I was like, so when we think about context, I come back to my analogy, we can't grow our fruity mangoes, our juicy mangoes, for want of an analogy, when our context is Icelandic. And we have to create that ourselves. We have to own that. So if I start saying, no, I can't wait, but I've got to support myself and I've got to protect this strength, who am I hurting long term? Me. Yeah. But actually, in opening up, everyone else opened up around me. They might not have done it publicly in front of others, but individually with me, they opened up. I tested it with clients. I was in a big sales role, so I had loads of different contacts with colleagues. And then ultimately, I realised that we all carry so much behind the scenes, and to be able to bring forward our best selves at work, we have to have tools and techniques and strategies and support to manage all of that. Yeah. And that's the coaching approach for mental health. Your point earlier, Kelly, that mental health isn't synonymous with mental illness. We just all have stuff going on, and we have to be able to organise and manage that to get on with work. But that's just a little story I thought I'd share.
It's a good one. I've had another private message saying, in response to the whole poll on whether you can say no at work or not, this person has said, I only feel like I can say no because stress caused me to have 2 major surgeries and a cancer scare. I don't care about saying no anymore. And that's horrifying, but it should not take anything that serious like surgery and a cancer scare for anyone to learn to say no. It should be like an automatic right. It's yeah.
And so, but sadly, it does take that, right? For a lot of people, it does take that severity because, again, I think we're told and trained and conditioned to believe that we can't, right? Organizations want yes people, right? They want people pleasers. They want all of that. And yet, then they don't. You know, well, again, right, come to annual performance reviews, which I haven't done since 2008. But, you know, you kind of start talking about, well, we don't want people, right? We don't, you know, we want you not challenging enough. We need you to be a bit more resilient, right? We need you to push back a little bit. We need all of this stuff. And then, of course, if you do, there are consequences to that as well. And again, I just,
you're difficult,
my heart goes out to you, right? I just feel, so yeah, and exactly that, Kirsty, right? You're seen as a difficult person if you dare to set boundaries, if you dare to say no, if you dare to do all of that. And I think the fact that that's a level that it gets to for somebody to just, but again, as you said, right, I don't care about saying no anymore. And sadly, for some people, that's the point that they get pushed to. They still want to do the job, they still want to work with the people that they're working with, they still want to do all of that, but actually it's like, I just don't care anymore. Now, again, how many of us in the workplace are at that point, like, I just don't care. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it like it is. I'm going to bring my best self, right? I just don't care. What impact does that then have to us? And again, not just on our work and the workplace, but what does that do to us? Because, again, like if we are just showing up to earn the paycheck every day, that's not great for us either, is it?
No, I mean, and I one of the ways I try and phrase that with people is it's learning to care a little less. It doesn't mean you don't have to care at all, but you just have to care a little less so that it doesn't affect you as a person.
Yeah. Or just care about yourself more again, right? It's rephrasing that. Like, I care about myself more, care about my well-being more, I care about my mental health more, I care about my mental fitness more, I care about my kids more, my caring responsibilities more, whatever it is it might be. I care about that more than whether you give a shit about me declining a meeting.
Exactly. So let's talk about some of the traps that people fall into. So obviously, a lot of HR roles are fairly high pressure, and we are known as a profession for putting everybody else's needs ahead of our own. So what are some of the cognitive traps that people fall into, and how can they kind of help protect their own well-being? Camilla, I'll ask you that first.
The specific to HR, I reckon it's probably like quite a lot of leaders, but in a way, there's a slight nuance, isn't there, around needing to fix. So I always think the superhero chat for me is really big. So the need to swoop in and save the day and be all things to all people and, you know, fix everything. And I think that is expected sometimes of HR, and it's hard to, you know, push back and say, no, that's not my job, as you will both know, and many of you on the call know better than me. But it's that feeling of wanting to be, you know, wanting to be able to help, but actually not really probably having the bandwidth, the capacity, mental flexibility, or the energy to do any of it. And I think this becomes the problem, because then we sort of see the people kind of dipping into this save the day mentality, feeling very noble. It's quite disempowering, you know, because the other people need to kind of own that and they need to kind of do it. You're left drained. It's kind of like a lose-lose all round. So I think we want to try and recognise when you're stepping into, it's going back to, I always come back to rewire for us, because that's our framework, but, you know, people that are in the rewire, we recognise it. It's really undervalued, like the ability to like reflect and recognise when you're doing this sort of stuff, and when you're doing it to help yourself or to help someone else. And I think to your point a moment ago, you know, who is it helping? Is it helping you? Is it helping your family? Is it helping you move forward in your career? Is it helping you gain more rest and opportunity to recover? If the answer is no, then there needs to be a really strong people, you know, really strong thought about why am I doing this? So boundaries, just really mindful, you know, that kind of thing is important.
Absolutely. Kelly, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, Cam's, you know, a lot there is, you know, linking to workload, how we see each other, that kind of martyr complex that, again, I kind of talk about a lot. But I also think one of the biggest traps for HR is almost thinking that, like, you are separate from the business. Now, again, some of this has come from the CIPD in terms of the training and everything that they've told us about the fact that you need to be looking after everybody else, and they still do bugger all to ensure that you're actually being looked after yourself. Yes. Some of this will come from leaders where it's HR, right? HR need to be dealing with that. HR need to be doing this. But I do think the biggest trap really is almost either the organisation and or, again, HR teams, HR individuals, HR functions, assuming that they are somehow separate from the rest of the organisation. And, like, you are people too. And so, yes, you can be there to support everybody else. Yes, you can try to be the martyrs. Yes, you can be the people pleasers. And yet, you know, you might think that you can't say no to any of this stuff, right? Because you're HR, you are people too within that organisation. And, you know, it's HR Wellbeing Week this week. I'm doing, again, a session with those tomorrow.
Didn't even know that.
Yeah. And, you know, like the hashtag for that one, right, is HR people are people too. And I think that's a lot of the misunderstanding, right? You are people too. And I think, you know, one of the biggest traps that I see HR fall into, in addition to the martyrdom and the workload and thinking that you've got to be available 365 24/7, for me that is the biggest trap for HR, and it's assuming that you are separate and therefore you've just got to keep giving to everybody else, and then you just kind of get the dregs of whatever's left afterwards. And actually, if you are filling yourself up first, and it is that cliched analogy, isn't it, of you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first, but ultimately that's what you've got to do. If you have no energy, we've talked about this a lot in this session, if you have no energy, you cannot deliver your best work. If you have no energy, you cannot be your best self. If you have no energy, you cannot be making those choices and get curious and you know, do all of that stuff for you and your team, and ultimately the organisation and the people that you're there to support. So for me, that's the biggest one. It is the assumption that HR is somehow separate from the rest of the organisation, because it isn't.
One of my friends missed my 50th birthday dinner, which was on a Saturday night, because as she was coming into London on the train, work rang and she had to turn around and go home. She didn't have to, but she chose to go home.
But she had to.
And she missed my dinner, which we had prepaid for. So I've never told her, and she's not likely to listen to this, but it cost me 200 quid for her taster menu because she had chosen to pick up a work issue on a Saturday instead. And that's HR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. Like, literally see it all the time. And it's just... It's a lot.
It's too
much. It's too much.
So I'm conscious of time, so I'm just gonna like one last question. So if someone's only got 10-15 minutes a day, what is a simple or effective habit that they could develop that will really help them strengthen their kind of cognitive ability or increase their mental flexibility? Happy for either of you to go first with that.
I mean, for me, it literally is, it is genuinely being present. And I say this, like, literally grab yourself a cuppa and just literally breathe and enjoy your cuppa for like 5 or 10 minutes. Because if you can consciously breathe and consciously be mindful, right? If you were to sit and hold your cup, your glass, if you don't drink hot drinks, right, whatever it might be, you can really tune into that. So you're literally just going to sit, you're going to breathe, you're going to come into your body, you're going to, be present in the moment. You're going to feel the temperature of your cup or your glass or whatever, and literally just be. That will start to slow down some of your nervous system. That's going to start to allow you to hear all of those thoughts that you've got going on in your brain. And the more that we can do that throughout the course of every day, actually, the more you build your mental capacity, the more you slow down your nervous system, the more you increase your ability for dealing with stress and for resilience and all of that sort of stuff. So if it was just 10 minutes, I would literally say have one mindful drink a day whilst breathing. Just literally be in the present, and all you're focused on literally is the temperature of what it is that you're holding, the taste of it, the smell of it, all of that, and just be in that moment for 5 or 10 minutes.
And if you could get away from your desk to do that, so people can't interrupt you.
It's choice. Again, it's choice, isn't it? And I think, again, I had this conversation with somebody a few weeks ago. When I first started in the world of work, we used to have 3 breaks a day. We used to have a 15-minute break in the morning, a 15-minute break in the afternoon, and a lunch break. Right, that's what you had. And seemingly, I speak to people now and they're like, oh my God, I can't even remember the last time. But like, I can't remember the last time that I had lunch. Can't remember the last time I had lunch away from my desk. Can't remember the last time that I did any of this stuff. And actually what a lot of us do now is, even if we do go away from our break, we're taking our work with us, right? On our mobile or our iPad or our laptop. We're literally carrying our work to wherever it is that we're going to just work from a completely different place. There was a woman that a few weeks ago on LinkedIn had put a post, as a business owner, I can't take any holiday, right? I'm longing for the day I'm longing for the year that I can take some time off in August. And I said to her, it has to be choice, right? That was one goal that I set for myself when I started my business in January 2014. And every single year I had a reason as to why I could not do it. And the biggest change came when I decided that this was going to be the year that I took August off. And guess what? I made it happen. Yeah. So we have to choose to make the decision. And again, I hear this lots of, I haven't got time to go away from my desk, I haven't got time for this, haven't got time for that. When I find the time, I'll do it. You're not going to find time, right? Time doesn't just come knocking on the door and go, hi, I've got 10 minutes for you. What we can do? You have to make the choice. You have to make the conscious choice, and you have to make the change in order to make the thing happen, because it's not going to happen on its own.
See, I'm very clear on that. So I have hardly taken any time off this year, and I work a lot of weekends, but I know that's 100% my choice. I know that. I've never once said I can't.
And then I just have a go at you afterwards.
She does. She messages me and shouts at me down the phone with her thumbs. But I'm choosing to. I've not once said that I can't take the weekend off. I have to. It's like my choice. Which is not healthy. I know that. I found it a lot easier personally to choose to be strict with my weekends when it was somebody else's company than I do when it's mine. But very, very much a choice. How about you, Camilla? What would you say is a good habit that people can develop?
So you want to start thinking of it as your sort of almost like a power-up space. So you can come at it from lots of different angles. If you want it to kind of reset and recharge, or if you want it to sort of start your day mindfully. For me, breathwork was always included, like just to ground. Often I come back from school run, I've been running around before that. By the time I even sit at my desk, I'm quite exhausted. And I've got quite a few different, shifts ahead of me, from another one from working some mothering and what have you. So I think a couple of minutes worth of breathing for me, I'm really big on retraining the brain to think about things positively rather than negatively. So the reframe of challenges, I've got multiple challenges that will go on morning, noon and night, but I try and think, what one thing am I tackling today? How can I reframe this from the challenges to something positive? And kind of just getting yourself into the habit of doing that over a cup of coffee, sat outside ideally, can be a really decent task. I would recommend no screens of any type or form. I know
you've got a favourite place that you go, haven't you? Is it like a park or a bench or something? There's somewhere that I know you like to go.
If I'm time poor, I'll just go and sit in my garden and just take those minutes. If I've got an hour, I'll walk down to, I live in a market town, so I've got a lovely little walk through the high street, and this churchyard that's got this beautiful bench overlooking the cricket grounds. It's just really peaceful. And I do all my creative thinking there. I go there for an hour, sometimes I'm there for 5 hours. I'm like in the flow, in the zone. So yeah, I would recommend shifting your context to meet the needs of what it is you're trying to do. Anything that's creative, strategic, kind of anything that's engaging that intellectual part of your brain, you need to think. And yeah, you should really shift that location and definitely get out of the space that you're normally feeling where I do my doing. So yeah, I would think that, and I think moving your body as part of it is really important. So even if it's just a few stretches, just a little bit of a walk around the garden, whatever it is, just you want to see this time as a rewire for your brain to move forward and to boost you, to almost like charge you up so you can carry on going. And you're going to have to keep coming back because your batteries will drain. You have to keep recharging. So this shouldn't be just a one-off. You should do multiple 10 minutes a day or do something like the comfort euro technique if it feels to you as well. So it's a great one.
That's great. And these are the sorts of things that don't have to take long, but they do add up. I mean, I know that, just getting out and walking around the block. I always joke about when I used to smoke, I found it an awful lot easier because I would always find time to go and have a cigarette. Yeah. Always find time for that. But once I gave up, it's suddenly you haven't got the time. It's like, but if you still had the nicotine habit, you'd have the time. So it's like a psychological cigarette break is what you need.
And from a time support standpoint, I'm coaching a senior principal scientist in a biotech firm, and hers is all about sort of navigating this burnout journey through her own kind of, experience of being in these high pressure, timed environments in the lab, no room to take 10 minutes out and change your context. So what can we do in the moment? So there are also ways to adapt all these strategies and tools to be done within 1 minute. You can have a quick reset in 1 minute. You can do something on a 2-minute frame. You can do it on a 10-minute frame. You can do it on a 40-minute frame. Everything needs to be adaptable to you, to your context, and to your reality. Yeah. That's important. That's what we talk a lot about.
Brilliant. Thank you, both of you. That's been brilliant. It's such a, I don't know, it's an interesting topic. It's such a helpful topic, and every time we talk about anything related to burnout or people's kind of mental strength, you get these examples from the people listening about the stuff that they're going through, and I just would love if everybody would take some of the advice that we give, and by all means reach out to any of us. You can find Camilla and Kelly on LinkedIn, and just ask if you've got questions, and if you feel like you need a little bit of help with any of this. So thank you very much, ladies.
You're welcome.
We will be back on the 25th for our next webinar, which is going to be all about money. Which is quite a different one, but we've got Joe Bailey and Abby Birch, so the face of
amazing,
and the face of money, or the FOF and the FOM. They are doing the next session for us on the 25th of September, so hope to see some of you then. Thank you very much for joining us.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.